Everybody. Sorry it's been a little while since I've last added a video to the channel. Today I'm going to go into a somewhat more technical area, which is how you can create a client of the MyFlightbook web service. So this is going to be oriented towards developers, and if you're not a developer, you'll probably want to stop watching right now. But the idea is to help you be able to build applications that can interact with a pilot's account on the MyFlightbook server. And I've already got a few of these going these days. So let's start by going down here at the bottom where at the bottom of the website where it says developers, and you'll click that and it'll take you to the developer page for MyFlightbook. So the top part here is about the fact that MyFlightbook is open source. So if you're interested in writing code and contributing to the code base for MyFlightbook, please, 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 I'd love to talk to you. Give me a buzz. But that's not what I'm talking about today. Today I'm talking about how you can write an app that interacts with the MyFlightbook service. And so this is also known as a web service. So I'm talking about how to create a client of a consumer of the MyFlightbook web service. So I'm going to use the word client from here on out. The client is your app, and the service or the server is MyFlightbook. And the idea is that the client can retrieve data on behalf of a user or push data on behalf of a user on MyFlightbook. And it does this using an internet standard called OAuth 2. I think that's Open Authentication Protocol 2. And the idea is that you need a way for a user of a site to grant permission to a client to access their data, but do so without revealing their password. Sending passwords around is just bad from a security perspective. I don't want that happening, and any user should also not want that happening. So OAuth 2 allows the client to get what's called a token, and whenever they want to do an operation on behalf of that client, they present the token, and the token is verified and validated and allows them to perform that operation. So I'm going to start off here with a few minutes talking about the whole OAuth process. This is standard. None of this is MyFlightbook specific. There's lots of pages. You can Google it. There's lots of stuff you can find out how. But I'm going to show you how the flow works and explain it to you and how you can set up. If you're familiar with OAuth, you can skip ahead a few minutes in the video. But regardless of how familiar you are or are not with OAuth, you do need to start by creating a client. So at the moment, I have no clients, and you can have multiple clients if you want. So here where it says add a client, I'm going to click to show. So a client is like a user. It has an ID and a secret. It's just like having a username and a password. And so the ID, I'm going to just say here MFB demo because that's what I'm doing. You should pick something that's a little bit more descriptive of what you have. Usual rules for usernames, no spaces, just alphanumerics. Client secret is your password. Keep it safe. I'm obviously using a terrible password here, but it's just for the sake of the ease of the demo. I'm going to delete this client when I'm done. So by the time you watch it, it'll be gone. The client name is your friendly name. So think of it as if this were your account, this would be your username, but this would be your first and last name. So if let's say I'm Acme Mapping Company, I would put Acme Mapping Company here. And that's what's going to be displayed to the user when they're asked to grant permission. And so this one, you really want it to be clear who you are. Otherwise, they're going to say, no, I don't know who you are. So as part of the OAuth process, you're going to redirect the user in a browser window to MyFlightbook. They're going to sign in if they're not already signed in, proving that they are who they say they are. And they'll have the opportunity to see who you are, what permissions you're requesting, and say yes or no to granting those permissions. And then the MyFlightbook website will redirect back to the URL that you provide as part of that process. Now, it's important to understand that I don't let you do just any URL there, because that would also be a security hole. Someone else could go in and claim to be you and have the user redirect back to them, and they'll get the authorization result, not you. So you can put one or more URLs here in this box, and you're basically promising that that you will only ever redirect to one of these URLs. And if the URL that you specify when you pass to me doesn't match one of these exactly, or if it's not HTTPS, then it'll be refused. It'll be an error, and the user won't even be given the opportunity to grant permission. So here I'm just for now putting in the Playpen app page here on the MyFlightbook site. You're welcome to do this to be able to play with it, but obviously you would put in a URL on your website. So then there's the requested scope and scopes, and the scope is really just a set of permissions. So there's a set of calls you can make within a single scope. So for example, there's a scope to retrieve your flying currency, to retrieve totals. There's one scope for adding and modifying flights, and there's a different scope for reading your flights. You can request to add or modify aircraft, or to read aircraft. See or visited airports, modify images, or create and update named queries. And so there are often multiple APIs that all require one common scope. And these are going to be displayed to the user so that they can make an informed decision. And it's really important. Don't ask for more scopes than you need for what it is that they're trying to do. If all you're doing is mapping, Acme Mapping Company is mapping their visited airports, then this is all I should be asking for, because there's no reason for me to be adding or modifying flights. So for the sake of the demo, I'm going to ask for everything here. But do try and request only the scopes that you need. So I'm going to click Add. And I'm going to hide that. Okay, here's my client ID, here's my client secret, here's the name, here's the URL. I've only got one, I only specified one, but I could have specified multiple ones. Here are the scopes I've requested. I can change this if I want to, or I can delete it when I'm done. So, great, I've got my client set up. Let me just quickly walk through the flow of how it works and make a call, and then I'll walk through some actual calls. So if you click on the link for the wiki on GitHub, then you'll go to this page here, and if you scroll down here a little ways, you'll see that there's a web page on the site that goes through all the above. That's the website. It's in the Playpen. And so if I click on this, when I say it's in the Playpen, there's a place on the website with a bunch of pages with functionality that it's a little rough around the edges. I don't quite consider it production, even if it all works. But this will let me actually play with the code a little bit. So OAuth is a three-step process. The first step is to get authorization from the user to access data on their account. And so what I'm going to do in this step is I'm going to do a browser URL redirect or click on a link. And in the URL, I'm going to pass in my client ID. So that's public, it's visible. And a redirect URL, in other words, where do I want you to come back to, and the scopes that I'm requesting. And I'm going to go to, and these URLs are important here, it's member/OAuth-authorized.aspx, and then in here I'm going to put my app's redirect URL that was down here. It must be in this list exactly. Capitalization, everything has to be exactly the same. So if you want to have www. whatever and just whatever. You want to put 2 URLs in there, and then you can use either one in here. And then here are the scopes that I'm requesting. And here I'm just going to request everything for the sake of the demo. When the user grants or denies authorization, I'm going to come back to this page, which happens to be the page I'm on, but that's just for the sake of the demo. It will come back to your website, and I'll show that here in a moment. In fact, let me pull the, so you can see my address bar in here. So I'm going to say get authorization, and you can see up here, auth authorized, client ID is MFB demo, redirect URI, here's my redirect, whoops. Yeah, here's the redirect URI, it's URL encoded, and then over here are the scopes that I'm requesting. And you can see that now I happen to be signed in. If I weren't signed in, I would sign in because you have to authenticate to get to this page. So here's my friendly name. Remember what I had put here, the client name. And it says, hey, Acme Mapping Client is requesting access to your data, and it's specifically requesting these permissions here. So then the user can read through these and decide, hey, wait, you're just mapping my visited airports. This is way too much. I'm going to say no. Or they can say, yes, this is all reasonable. I know what you're doing. I understand why you need to do all of these things. And you say yes. Either way, I'm going to go back to that redirect URI, which again, in this case, is that Playpen app. And so here I am back. And if I look up here in the address bar, there's a code here. And if I scroll over, you'll see, well, actually I can put it down below. What it did is it also passed back to me down here. You can see the authorization result, and that's this big blob here. And what that blob is, and it's coming out of the address bar here, out of the URL. That blob is an encrypted blob. You don't get to decrypt it. That said, hey, yes, user Joe Smith has granted client MFB demo permission to access their account with the requested scopes. That's great, but now you can't use that to make calls. What you need to do is convert it into an auth token. And so this is where you're going to make a server-to-server call. It's got to be over HTTPS, and this is not in the browser. This is an actual HTTPS call. And you're going to pass in that authorization, your client ID, and your client secret. So basically what you're saying is, I'm MFB demo. I can prove it because here's my secret, and I want access to John Smith's account, and here's the blob that shows that they gave permission for that to happen. And again, this is all standard OAuth. There are libraries for pretty much every language out there that will do all of this for you. So I click on Get Token. It's made the call, and if I go down here, now you'll see the token result. And the result here is in JSON format, and you can see, where is it? Here, our access token. So here, this blob here is the access token. That's what you're going to pass in whenever you want to make a call to the MyFlightbook web service. So just store that away and keep it secure because that thing's powerful. It has an expiration date and time. After that date and time, it will be rejected. But I very nicely tell you what that expiration date and time is in Zulu time. So if you're getting close to that date and time, you can use the value of another blob here called the refresh token. And the refresh token can be used by the same process to get a new access token. So that way, if something happens and you lose your access token, it's life limited, and then you have to go through the conversion process again and validate yourself to get a new access token. But best don't let the access token leak. So that was step 2. Step 3 is now we can use that auth token. So there's a bunch of different things that you can do on the site, and the URL that you want to hit is it's actually the same URL that you use to convert the authorization into an auth token. It's logbook OAuth token.aspx. And then you'll provide a verb on top of that that says what you're trying to do, and alternatively, or optionally, I should say, depending on the call, there'll also be additional data, either in the URL if it's a get, or in the form if it's a post. So let me show a couple of examples here just to make it very simple. So if I do a currency request, I'm just looking to get your currency. I can do that as a get, and by default it's in XML. And so that's passing in, see how up here I passed in OAuth token.aspx/currency is the verb, and then I passed the access token. Notice that it's HTTPS. It will be rejected if it's not, and that's because you're passing in an access token and you don't want it in the clear. And so here I can see my currency, and it's in XML format. So the state or the attribute is airplane multi-engine land passengers. In my case, this expired in 2017. I'm not current. I'm short by 3 landings, and so forth. We'll get into how what all this data is. So this is XML by default. I can also pass a flag requesting JSON, and now the result is in JSON format. Same data, just different format. And I could have done that just as easily with a post. It doesn't matter. But if there are a number of calls that require a post. You can't do it with a get because it's got too many parameters, or it has parameters that you can't put into a URL. So I can do aircraft for user and get the user's aircraft, for example. These are the ones that you've added into your account. Same thing. So this page is a nice page because it lets you play with some of the common calls and just take a look at the results. And so, for example, if I want to view the user's flights, that is post only, and I can pass in a flight query and an offset and a limit. And so the idea is offset is starting from the nth flight, and then limit is how many flights to get. So if I put in, say, offset 20 and limit 5, this will give me flights 21 through 25, if that makes sense. And here I could put in whatever a flight query that specifies which flights I want to get. So I'm not going to dive into a lot here. That'll get too deep, and I'm already running a little long. But let's go back to the wiki. So again, here's the developer page. There's a link from there to the wiki. So I've just gone through how the OAuth process works. And here it is described again on the wiki. So here are the functions that are available, and I've grouped them by the common CRUD. I've grouped them by area, and then denoted them as whether they're a create operation, a read operation, an update operation, or a delete operation. So, for example, for around aircraft, you can add an aircraft, you can get the aircraft for the user, you can get a list of all the makes and models in the system, which you kind of need because when you're adding an aircraft, you specify a make and model by its ID, and so you have to get the models to know what IDs to do. You can update an aircraft, and you can delete it from their account. Similarly, there is, for flights, you can commit a flight. You can get flights, that's what I was just showing you. You can get the flight path for a flight. You can get any properties for a flight. Actually, that one's deprecated. Anyhow, you can see what all the different operations are here. There are actually more operations than this that are available. So that's the whole disclaimer here. But they are deprecated or they're only used internally. So don't use them. They may go away or change at any time. And if it breaks you, well, that's your problem, not mine, because I warned you. So if it's not in this list, you're not going to see it. So then the question is, okay, that's nice. Where do I get documentation for each of these functions? And the answer is, it's a little bit technical, but basically here is a link. And if you look on the bottom here, it's in the bottom lower left, myflightbook.com, logbook public web service .asmx. And so this has all of the all of the calls you can make. Again, this is a superset of what is supported, so don't rely on that. But you click here on the service description, and this is where you can get into the nitty-gritty. This is what's called a WSDL, or a Web Service Description Language, and it's in XML, but it's pretty straightforward, if a little bit obtuse to, I suppose that's sort of a conflict, to read. So this defines a bunch of data types and functions. So here is a function call, aircraft for user. So that was one of the supported ones. And what you're going to pass in for that one is an auth token. Actually, you only pass in the auth token if you don't use the auth token if you're using the web services. That's a legacy thing used by the mobile apps. The mobile apps use the same API, but they have a slightly different authentication mechanism. They do collect a username and password, but I control them, so I trust them. Sorry, I'm not willing to do that for others. But here, let's take a look. For example, when you get aircraft, well, what is it all? What data fields do I look for, and how do I interpret them? This is where you can see that. So you can see that min occurs, max occurs, instance type ID. There will be one. It will be present, and there will be an integer that represents the instance type for the aircraft. So it's not optional. It will be there one time and exactly one time. So this is whether it is a real aircraft, whether it is an uncertified simulator, whether it is a full simulator, things like that. It will have an aircraft instance type, and we can see down here, if we scroll down a little bit, here are the instance types: real aircraft, uncertified simulator, certified simulator, and so forth. And in fact, that corresponds to the instance type ID. What is the date of the last VOR check? What is the date of the last altimeter inspection? And so forth and so on. Probably the most interesting ones are going to be the tail number and the model ID. Let's just take a look for kicks at another thing. Here's a lot of images on the site are done MFBM image infos, MyFlightbook image infos. They will have a width, they will have a height, they will have a thumbnail width, a thumbnail height. They will have an image type, which again, see how it says it is of type, image file type. So it is a JPEG, a PDF, a link to a PDF on Amazon S3, a video, or unknown. It'll have a comment. This is what you can display. It'll have but the key thing you want is the URL for the full image and the URL for the thumbnail. You actually don't need pretty much any of the other stuff. And so every function call method you'll be able to find in here. Here's a useful one, the flight query. This is how you can specify what flights you want to return. All the data types are in here. Let me just show one other item here. The key thing for a flight, here we go, is a logbook entry. Logbook entry, which is derived from logbook entry base, which is derived from logbook entry core. And I'll let you read through these. There are a lot of them. But you can see things like the username. You will need that, although that generally will get specified for you, so you don't actually need to specify it. How many full stop landings were there? What aircraft was it in? That's by ID, by the integer ID. How much simulated instrument time was there? How much actual instrument time was there? What was the date of the flight? And so forth. All of these, of course, are in hours. They're decimal or double will work. Things like that, and then you can see, here are the properties for the flight, which may not be present. So it's optional. Min occurs equals 0. Flight images, same thing. And you can see, for example, so here is array of custom flight property. So if it's around, you will have 0 to unbounded. You'll have any number of flight properties on the flight. So there's an awful lot of stuff here that you can wade through, or just contact me if there's any confusion about how to use it, or if you need a call and there's no good way to do it. But what you'll do is you'll pass up the required data when you make the call, and it tells you what data you need to pass up when you find the call name in here. And you'll get the results in XML or JSON format, depending on which you request, and then you parse it, and then you can use this as your dictionary to figure out how to interpret what the result was. So again, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about how to use that, myflightbook@gmail.com. And I hope this is helpful. Thanks.